The billionaire married her out of desire, but treated her like his biggest mistake until her secret changed everything. Get out. Those two words hung in the air of the $12 million Beacon Hill townhouse like shattered glass. Doris Clifford stood in the living room, 7 months pregnant, her hands trembling with rage she could no longer contain. Wesley Gregg, Billionaire CEO, looked at his wife like she had just slapped him, which emotionally she had. "I didn't mean it like that," he started, his voice cracking. "Yes, you did." Doris's voice was ice over fire. "You meant every word. This is what you actually think, that I'm a financial burden you're graciously supporting, that your money gives you the right to make unilateral decisions about your life, while I'm supposed to just accept whatever scraps of attention you offer. Doris, please, get out of this room. Get out of this house. Go to London early. Go to Singapore. Go anywhere that isn't here because I can't look at you right now. How did a marriage that started with such burning desire end up here? Two people who once couldn't keep their hands off each other, now unable to occupy the same room without destroying each other. And what secret had Doris been carrying that would either save this crumbling union or become its final devastating blow? If you've ever loved someone who treated you like their biggest mistake, if you've ever hidden a truth because you were terrified of the response, if you've ever wondered whether people can actually change, or if we're all just performing growth while staying fundamentally broken, then you need to hear this story. Because what happened between Doris and Wesley isn't a fairy tale. It's a war fought in therapy sessions and midnight conversations, and the brutal honesty required to rebuild something worth saving from absolute ruins. But to understand how they got to that moment, to that explosive get out echoing through a house that had never truly felt like a home, we need to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to when desire felt like destiny, and neither of them knew they were building a marriage on foundations made of sand. 18 months earlier, Doris Clifford was nobody Wesley Gregg was supposed to notice. She was a struggling artist in Boston's South End, living in a cramped studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant, the smell of pho permanently embedded in her clothes. Her days were split between creating massive abstract canvases in a shared warehouse space and working 3 shifts a week at an upscale gallery in Newbury Street, smiling at rich collectors who bought art the way most people bought groceries, casually, thoughtlessly, never understanding the blood and soul poured into each piece. Wesley Gregg was exactly the kind of man who bought art that way. At 41, he had built Gregg Capital into a venture firm that turned startups into empires. Forbes estimated his net worth at $2.3 billion. He collected companies the way some men collected watches. Efficient, strategic, always calculating return on investment. They met at a gallery opening, one of those pretentious affairs where champagne flowed and conversations were performances. Doris was working, circulating with trays of wine, practically invisible in her black server uniform. Wesley noticed her anyway. "What do you think of this piece?" He gestured to a canvas Doris herself had created, though it was displayed under the gallery owner's name, because that's how the art world worked when you were nobody. "You have an opinion, I can tell. You've been staring at it for 5 minutes between rounds." Doris should have given the polite, safe response. Instead, exhausted from a double shift and tired of pretending, she told the truth. "I think it's trying too hard. The artist is screaming for validation instead of trusting the work to speak. It's desperate, and desperation always shows." Wesley had laughed, a genuine startled sound. "And you know this how? Because I painted it." The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. Wesley forgot about the networking he was supposed to be doing. Doris forgot she was supposed to be working. They talked about art and philosophy and what people dreamed about when they stopped performing success for others. "You're not like the others," Wesley said as the gallery was closing. "Everyone else here is selling me something. You're just real." Doris should have recognized that for the red flag it was. Being valued for not being like other women, for being real in contrast to some imaginary fake women. That wasn't the compliment it sounded like. But she was 29, exhausted from financial instability, and this beautiful, powerful man was looking at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. So when he asked for her number, she gave it. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Wesley pursued her with the same intensity he brought to acquisitions. Dinners at restaurants where menus didn't have prices. Weekend trips to his lake house in New Hampshire. Private gallery tours where he bought her favorite pieces without blinking at 5-figure price tags. He was intoxicating, attentive in ways Doris had never experienced. He asked about her work, her dreams, her childhood. He listened like her words mattered more than quarterly earnings reports. "I've never met anyone like you," Wesley told her 3 months in, as they lay tangled in his downtown penthouse sheets. "Everyone in my world is performing, networking, strategizing, always calculating advantage. You just exist. You create because you have to, not because you're trying to impress anyone. You make me want to be more than my bank account." Doris fell in love with that version of Wesley, the man who seemed to see past surfaces to something true, the man who made her feel valued for her mind and talent, not just her body, though he clearly valued that too. Their physical connection was magnetic, urgent, the kind of desire that makes rational thinking impossible. 6 months after they met, Wesley proposed. It wasn't a grand public gesture, just the two of them at his lake house, watching the sunset paint the water gold. He pulled out a ring that probably cost more than Doris had earned in her entire life. "Marry me, not because it makes sense on paper, not because you fit some image of what a wife should be. Marry me because you make me feel human again, because I want to build a life with you that means something beyond profit margins." "Yes," Doris said, because she believed every word. The wedding happened fast. 3 months of planning. A ceremony at a historic estate that made it into Town and Country magazine. Doris wore a custom gown she'd designed herself, layers of silk that made her look like she was emerging from clouds. Wesley couldn't stop staring at her. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered as they danced. Doris believed him, believed in them, believed that this burning desire they felt was the foundation strong enough to build a lifetime on. The cracks started small. Wesley traveled for work. She'd known that going in. But somehow the reality felt different than the abstract idea. He was gone 4 days a week, sometimes 5. Singapore, London, Tokyo, building his empire while Doris rattled around their Beacon Hill townhouse, a space so elegant and cold it never felt like hers. "I bought you a studio," Wesley said, his solution to her restlessness. "Prime space in Back Bay. You can work without worrying about rent or sales. Create whatever you want." It was generous. It should have felt like support. Instead, it felt like compensation for his absence, like he was trying to buy her contentment instead of actually being present. But Doris told herself she was being ungrateful. Wesley was giving her financial security she'd never had. A beautiful home. Freedom to create without commercial pressure. What more could she want? Except she wanted him. Not his money or his grand gestures. Just him, present and engaged, choosing her over another deal, another acquisition, another empire expansion. 6 months into the marriage, Wesley stopped asking about her work. He'd come home exhausted, pour expensive scotch, and talk about his deals until Doris's eyes glazed over. When she tried to share about her latest series, he'd nod absently, clearly not listening. "That sounds great," he'd say, then return to his laptop. Doris started spending more time at her studio, building a life that didn't require his participation. She made friends in the Boston art scene, cultivated relationships with galleries, started gaining recognition for her work. On paper, she was thriving. In reality, she was building armor against the loneliness of her marriage. They stopped having sex. Or rather, sex became occasional, perfunctory. The magnetic desire that had brought them together faded into awkward encounters that left Doris feeling more alone than satisfied. One night, 8 months into their marriage, she tried to talk about it. "Wesley, we need to discuss what's happening between us." He looked up from his laptop like she'd interrupted something important. "What do you mean? We barely talk anymore. You're always working. When you're home, you're not really here. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. I'm building something, Doris. This company doesn't run itself. I'm not asking you to neglect your work. I'm asking for some part of you that isn't exhausted or distracted. Some version of the man I married." Wesley's expression shifted. Something defensive and cold. "The man you married was always this person. I didn't hide who I was. I told you my work was demanding. You also told me I made you want to be more than your bank account," Doris shot back. "What happened to that? I don't have energy for this right now." Wesley closed his laptop with sharp finality. "I have an early flight to Singapore." He left the room, left her standing there with words caught in her throat and the dawning realization that she'd married someone who desired her but didn't actually want the work of loving her. That was the pattern. Doris would try to connect. Wesley would retreat behind work. The distance between them grew until there were two people coexisting in the same expensive space, performing marriage for the outside world while slowly dying inside it. Doris stopped trying. built her life around her art, her friends, the foundation she was creating for single parents, because if she couldn't fix her own marriage, at least she could help others build stable lives. She became exactly what Wesley seemed to want: independent, undemanding, decorative enough for social functions but requiring nothing from him emotionally. They were polite strangers sharing an address. 14 months into the marriage, Doris's period was late. She told herself it was stress. She'd been working intensely on a new series, pulling late nights at the studio. Her body was probably just reacting to the pressure, but days turned into weeks. The nausea started. The exhaustion that felt different than normal tiredness. The way coffee suddenly smelled revolting. She took a test in the bathroom of her studio, not wanting to do it at home where Wesley might notice. 3 minutes that felt like hours. Then the result, clear and undeniable. Pregnant. Doris stared at the positive test, her hands shaking. She took 2 more. Same result. All positive, all confirming the impossible complication that would transform an already dying marriage into something she had no roadmap for navigating. She didn't tell Wesley. Not that day. Not that week. Not for 6 weeks, as the secret grew inside her along with a tiny human neither of them had planned for. Because how do you tell your emotionally absent husband that you're pregnant? How do you add a baby to a marriage that barely functioned? How do you trust that he won't treat this child the same way he treated you, with initial desire that faded into resentment and absence? Doris went to doctor's appointments alone, watched her first ultrasound alone, heard the heartbeat alone, made decisions about prenatal vitamins and birth plans alone, because that's what she'd learned to do in this marriage. Everything alone. She told herself she was processing, taking time to decide what she wanted before his opinion complicated things. In reality, she was terrified of his reaction, terrified of raising a child in a home where the parents were strangers, terrified of becoming a single mother in everything but name. The secret felt like a bomb she was carrying, waiting to explode. Meanwhile, Wesley continued his pattern. Work, travel, distraction. If he noticed Doris's morning sickness or her growing emotional distance, he didn't mention it. They existed in parallel lives that intersected only at social obligations. Until the gallery opening. Doris's first major solo exhibition in 18 months. Fractured Meridians, a series exploring the architecture of broken things. Every painting was a blueprint of an imaginary city, beautiful and destroyed, built and ruined simultaneously. The opening was everything she'd worked toward. Critics praising her evolution. Collectors buying pieces at prices that validated years of struggle. Her career was finally, actually launching beyond local recognition. Wesley texted that morning. 6 words. Can't make it. Deal running long. No apology. No acknowledgement that this mattered. Just another absence in a marriage built on them. Doris went to her opening alone. Smiled through congratulations. Discussed her artistic process with strangers while her husband was somewhere across the world, choosing business over her. Again, she sold 6 paintings. The gallery owner called it an unqualified triumph. Doris felt hollow. She took an Uber home just past midnight, exhausted and 12 weeks pregnant, with a secret she couldn't carry alone anymore. The house was dark. Wesley was in Singapore, or so she thought. She found him in the kitchen, sitting in the dark with a glass of scotch. "You're here," she said, her heart doing something complicated. "I'm here." Wesley's voice carried that distinctive timbre she'd once found attractive. "I finished early. Flew back this afternoon. I made it to your opening. Stayed in the back. You were extraordinary, Doris. The work is remarkable." And just like that, rage replaced surprise. "You were there. Yes, but you didn't come talk to me. Didn't let me know you'd made it. Just watched from the shadows like some kind of ghost. You didn't need me," Wesley said. "You were handling it perfectly. You didn't need your husband standing beside you like some kind of prop. That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Doris? Tell me what you want from me, because I'm clearly getting it wrong. If you've ever stood in your own home feeling like a stranger, if you've ever wanted to scream at someone you once loved with everything in you, if you've ever carried a secret so heavy it was crushing you, then you know exactly where Doris was in this moment. Pregnant, furious, exhausted from performing strength when she felt like breaking. And what happened next, what she said next, would change everything. But first, I need you to do something for me. If this story is already hitting too close to home, If you recognize this kind of marriage where desire died and left only resentment, I need you to hit that like button right now, because what you're about to witness is either the collapse of everything or the beginning of the hardest, most honest rebuilding two people have ever attempted. Share this with someone who needs to know that hitting rock bottom isn't the end of the story. It's just the place where you finally stop pretending and start choosing truth over comfort. Now, back to that kitchen where everything is about to detonate. I wanted you there, Doris said, keeping her voice level even though everything inside was shaking. Beside me, not performing some supportive husband routine, just there. Is that really so difficult to understand? No. Wesley set down his glass. It's not difficult to understand. It's difficult to execute when I'm not sure I'm wanted. The words landed like a slap. Not sure you're wanted. Wesley, you're my husband. Legally, yes. But Doris, you've built a life that doesn't include me in any meaningful way. Your art, your studio, your social circle. I'm an appendage to all of it, not an integral part. You don't call me when something good happens. You don't ask my opinion. You don't seem to need me for anything except the occasional appearance and the financial support. You're never here, Doris countered, her composure cracking. You're in Singapore, London, Tokyo. You work 18-hour days and come home too exhausted for conversation. What exactly am I supposed to include you in when you're physically absent 90% of the time? So we're both lonely in a marriage that looks perfect from the outside. Wesley's voice carried something that sounded like grief. That's what this is. Doris felt tears threatening. I don't want to do this right now. It's late. I'm exhausted. Can we not dissect our failing marriage at 1 a.m? When would you like to do it? Wesley stood, and she saw how worn down he looked. During one of our scheduled dinners, where we make polite conversation. Or maybe we should book it with my assistant. Marriage crisis conversation. Please schedule for a time when both parties can dedicate appropriate emotional bandwidth. The sarcasm was unusual for him. Sharp enough that Doris actually looked at him, really looked, and saw something she'd been too preoccupied to notice. He looked haggard, exhausted in a way expensive suits couldn't hide. How long have you felt like this? She asked quietly. Wesley laughed without humor. How long have we been married? 22 months. So, 22 months. From the beginning. Not the very beginning. The first few months were good, weren't they? Before we settled into whatever this is. Before I became the absent workaholic and you became the independent artist who didn't need anything from me. Doris wanted to argue. But he was right, and they both knew it. They'd been performing a marriage for almost 2 years, hitting all the expected marks while the substance eroded. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. Neither do I. Wesley moved closer. But Doris, I need you to know something. I didn't marry you as some trophy wife acquisition. I married you because you were the first person in years who made me feel like I was more than my net worth. You saw me, the actual person underneath the CEO performance, and I thought maybe I could be that person with you. The confession surprised her. In 22 months, Wesley had never been this vulnerable. What happened? She asked. If that's what you wanted, what happened to change it? Wesley was quiet for a long moment. I got scared. You're extraordinary, Doris. Your talent, your vision, the way you move through the world. It's all extraordinary. And I'm just good at making money. I build nothing, create nothing. And I realized about 6 months in that I had nothing to offer you except money and status, things you've made clear you don't particularly need. So you left. Understanding clicked into place. You buried yourself in work because you didn't think you were enough, while you buried yourself in your art and built a life that didn't require my presence, Wesley countered. We both retreated, Doris. I'm not claiming sole responsibility for this mess. He was right. She'd been so focused on protecting herself from disappointment that she'd preemptively created distance, built walls disguised as independence. Her phone buzzed, a text from her doctor's office, automated reminder about tomorrow's appointment. Routine follow-up, though nothing about the situation was routine. What is it? Wesley asked, seeing her expression change. Nothing. Just a friend drunk texting from the after-party. It was a lie. She'd been lying for 6 weeks. But now, looking at Wesley standing in their kitchen at 1 a.m, honest and vulnerable in ways she'd never seen, Doris realized she couldn't keep lying. Not about this. Wesley, she said quietly. We need to talk. Actually talk, not just circle around problems. But not tonight. I'm exhausted, and this needs to happen when we're both capable of processing it. He studied her face. Tomorrow. I have a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, but after that, can you be here? Actually here, not in Singapore or on a conference call. I'll be here, Wesley promised. Doris, whatever this is, tomorrow, she repeated, cutting him off, because if she started now, she wouldn't stop. That night, they slept in separate rooms. Their pattern. Doris lay in the master bedroom, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, thinking about tomorrow, about the conversation that would change everything, about whether a man who married her out of desire but treated her like a beautiful mistake could transform into a father, a partner, someone who stayed. The medical building in Back Bay had the kind of expensive anonymity that wealthy people preferred for healthcare. Nothing that screamed doctor's office, just well-appointed spaces that could have housed law firms. Doris sat in the waiting room at 2:30 the next afternoon, filling out forms she'd completed twice before, her hand shaking slightly as she checked boxes about symptoms. Nausea, yes. Fatigue, yes. Emotional changes, well, does constant urge to cry when your husband uses past tense to describe your relationship count. Mrs. Gregg, the nurse appeared with a professional smile. Dr. Lin is ready for you. The exam was routine. Blood pressure, weight, standard questions. Dr. Lin, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense manner, pulled up ultrasound images on her computer. Everything looks perfect. You're at 12 weeks. Hormone levels exactly where they should be. Have you told the father yet? The question landed like a punch. Not yet. Dr. Lin's expression remained neutral, but concern flickered there. Doris, I'm not here to judge, but you're approaching the end of your first trimester. At some point, this isn't something you can hide. I'm telling him tonight. I just needed to process it myself first. Make decisions about what I wanted before his opinions became part of the equation. And what do you want? It was the question Doris had been asking herself for 6 weeks. I want to keep it. I want this baby, even if everything else in my life is complicated and messy. This is the one thing I'm sure about. Dr. Lin nodded, making notes. Then that's your answer. Whatever the father's response is, you've made your decision. Everything else is just logistics. The confidence in that statement settled something in Doris's chest. Dr. Lin was right. Whatever Wesley's reaction, she'd already chosen. The baby was happening. Everything else would organize itself around that truth. She left the medical building at 4:30, stopping at the cafe across the street for ginger tea, the only thing that reliably settled her stomach. The October afternoon was beautiful. Boston doing its autumn performance with gold and crimson leaves, that particular quality of light that made everything look painted. The kind of day that should have felt hopeful. Instead, Doris felt like she was walking toward an execution. The townhouse was lit when she arrived home at 5. Wesley's car in the garage. He'd kept his promise. He was here. She found him in the living room, laptop open but clearly not working. He'd lost the jacket and tie, sleeves rolled up. When she entered, he closed the computer. How was your appointment? Fine. Routine follow-up. Wesley stood, studying her with intensity that made her want to look away. Doris, you've been different for weeks. Withdrawn, avoiding me even more than usual. And last night, you said we needed to talk, which usually means something's wrong. So before we start whatever conversation we're about to have, I need you to know I'm prepared. If you want a divorce, if you've met someone else, if you simply can't do this anymore, just tell me. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is more careful distance where we both pretend everything is fine. The assumption that she might want a divorce, might have met someone else, was almost funny, because the truth was so much more complicated. I'm pregnant. The words came out flat and direct, stripped of the careful phrasing she'd planned. Doris watched the color drain from Wesley's face. He sat back down, not quite collapsing but close, staring at her like she'd just announced she was an alien. Pregnant. Yes. For 6 weeks. You've known this for 6 weeks. Yes. And you didn't tell me, because... He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. Doris sat in the chair across from him, maintaining distance because she needed it to get through this. Because I needed to decide what I wanted before your opinion became part of the equation. Because our marriage is barely functional, and I didn't know if adding a baby to this mess would be the stupidest decision I could make, or the only honest thing we've done in months. Because I was scared, Wesley. I'm still scared. Of what? Of me. The hurt in his voice was raw. Of you disappearing completely. of becoming even more of an obligation than I already am, of watching you check out emotionally because fatherhood wasn't part of whatever arrangement you thought you were signing up for when you married the artistic free spirit. Wesley made a sound that might have been a laugh or sob. Jesus, Doris, is that really what you think of me? That I'd abandon you, abandon our child, because it's inconvenient to my lifestyle? I think you married me for reasons that had nothing to do with building a family. I think we've been acting out a version of marriage that works for dinner parties, but falls apart in the actual daily work of being partners. And I think a baby deserves better than parents who can barely stand to be in the same room together. Wesley's hands were shaking. I can't believe you've been carrying this alone for 6 weeks. That you felt like you had to process it by yourself because I'm so unreliable, so absent, that you couldn't trust me with something this important. Can you honestly tell me I was wrong? Doris challenged. You just assumed I wanted a divorce. Your first instinct when I said we needed to talk wasn't maybe something's wrong and my wife needs support. It was, she's leaving me. What does that say about the foundation we've built? The silence was heavy with 2 years of accumulated disappointments. Finally, Wesley spoke, his voice quiet but intense. What do you want to do? About the pregnancy, about us, about all of it. I'm keeping the baby. That's non-negotiable. As for us, she paused, trying to find words for something she barely understood. I don't want to raise a child in a home where the parents are strangers. I don't want our baby growing up feeling like they're the inconvenient result of a marriage that should have ended before they existed. But I also don't know if we can fix this, Wesley. I don't know if you want to fix it or if you're just going to throw money at the situation and hope it resolves itself. Wesley stood abruptly, moving to the window overlooking their courtyard. The autumn light was fading, throwing shadows across his face. You think I married you out of desire, physical attraction and the appeal of having a brilliant artist on my arm for social events. That I wanted the aesthetic of you without the reality. And maybe there's some truth to that. I was attracted to you, obviously. You're stunning and talented and everything I'm not. But Doris, if all I'd wanted was a beautiful wife for appearances, I could have married any number of women who would have been perfectly happy with that arrangement. He turned to face her, and she was startled to see tears in his eyes. Wesley never cried, never showed vulnerability like this. I married you because for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was more than my bank account. You asked me about art and philosophy and what I dreamed about. You challenged me to think beyond quarterly earnings. You made me want to be someone who created value instead of just accumulating it. And then we got married, and I realized I had no idea how to be that person. I only knew how to be the workaholic CEO. So I defaulted to what I knew because at least I was good at that. At least I could succeed at something. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest in ways their marriage had never been. I was terrified you'd realize I was empty underneath the expensive suits, Wesley continued. That I'd married you under false pretenses, pretending to be deeper than I actually was. So I pulled away before you could leave me first. I know that's cowardice. I should have stayed and done the hard work of becoming the person you deserved. But I was scared, Doris. I've been scared our entire marriage. Doris felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, but opening, making room for understanding. You complete idiot. Her voice was thick with tears she'd been holding for months. I didn't fall in love with some fantasy version of you. I fell in love with Wesley Gregg, the man who spent 3 hours with me at a terrible gallery opening discussing whether art had moral obligations. The man who took me to his favorite dive bar instead of some pretentious restaurant on our 3rd date. The man who admitted he had no idea what half the art at the MFA meant, but loved it anyway. You loved me? Wesley asked. The past tense landed between them like broken glass. When did that change? When you left, when you chose work over us, when you started treating our marriage like another business obligation, when I realized I'd married someone who desired me but didn't actually want me in his life. I never stopped wanting you in my life. I just didn't know how to be in yours, how to exist in your world of creativity and meaning, when I've spent 20 years optimizing profit margins. So where does that leave us? I want to try, Wesley said, not try to go back to what we were. I don't think that's possible or even desirable, but try to build something new, something honest. I want to be the father our child deserves, and I want to be the husband you needed me to be from the beginning. I'm probably going to fail sometimes. I'm going to default to work when things get difficult, because that's my pattern. But Doris, I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove I can change. I don't want promises. I want action. I want you to show up, Wesley. Not just physically, but emotionally. I want you here when things are boring or difficult or mundane. I want you to prove through consistent choice that this marriage and this family matter more than another deal. Then that's what I'll do. Starting now, what do you need? The question surprised her. In 2 years, he'd rarely asked what she needed. I need you to come to my next doctor's appointment. It's in 2 weeks, the 16-week checkup. They'll do another ultrasound. I want you there. I'll be there. What else? I need you to go to couples therapy with me. We can't fix this on our own. Wesley nodded. I'll find someone tomorrow. Someone who specializes in, what do we need? Marriage counseling, family therapy, both. And Wesley, I need you to understand this isn't going to be fixed in a few sessions. This is months of work, maybe years. It's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to want to run back to Singapore every time it gets too real. But if you're serious about this, you stay. You sit in the discomfort and you do the work anyway. I'll stay. Wesley's voice was quiet but firm. I promise you, Doris, I'll stay. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a relationship where both people finally stopped performing and started telling the truth? Where the masks came off and you saw each other's actual wounds instead of the polished versions you'd been presenting? It's terrifying. It's also the only way anything real gets built. Because what Doris and Wesley were about to discover is that marriage isn't saved by grand gestures or passionate declarations. It's saved by showing up to therapy appointments when you'd rather be anywhere else. By sitting with discomfort instead of running. By choosing each other on the boring Tuesday when there's nothing romantic about it. If this is resonating with you, if you've ever had to rebuild trust from absolute zero, do me a favor. Comment below and tell me, does real change actually happen, or are we all just better at performing it? Because this community, we tell each other the truth. We don't do fairy tales here. We do the messy reality of what it actually takes to transform. Now, let's talk about what happened when these two people actually tried to do the work. The first therapy session happened 3 days later in a brownstone office in Cambridge. Dr. Patricia Osei specialized in high-conflict couples, which apparently was the clinical term for marriages that looked perfect while slowly dying inside. She was in her early 60s with silver locks and a direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every excuse humans could devise. So, Dr. Osei said after preliminary paperwork, Doris is pregnant. Neither of you planned it, and your marriage has been functionally over for at least a year, but you're both here trying to salvage it for the baby. Have I got that right? Wesley and Doris exchanged glances. The brutal summary stung, but it wasn't inaccurate. We're here because we want to fix things, Wesley said carefully. Not just for the baby, but for us. That's lovely, Dr. Osei replied, but I need honesty, not performance. Wesley, do you love your wife? The directness caught him off guard. Yes. Doris, do you love your husband? Doris hesitated. The hesitation said more than any answer could. I loved who I thought he was. I'm not sure I know who he actually is. Dr. Osei nodded like this confirmed something. Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to strip away all the performance, the ways you present yourselves to the world, the narratives you've constructed, all of it. We're going to get down to the truth of who you both are and what you actually want. And if, after doing that work, you decide this marriage is worth saving, then we'll talk about how to rebuild. But I won't help you create a prettier version of a fundamentally broken dynamic just because a baby is involved. Children deserve authentic parents, not performers pretending to be a family. The sessions that followed were brutal. Dr. Osei had a gift for identifying patterns. Wesley's emotional retreat disguised as professional ambition. Doris's independence weaponized to protect herself from disappointment. She made them articulate the unspoken contracts they'd entered the marriage with. You thought you were marrying a muse, Dr. Osei said to Wesley during their third session. Someone who would inspire you to be creative without requiring you to actually do the transformation work. And you, she said, turning to Doris, thought you were marrying someone who saw past your artistic persona to your authentic self. But you never actually revealed that authentic self, did you? You performed independence because you didn't trust him not to leave if you showed him your needs. So, we're both frauds, Doris said bitterly. Perfect foundation for raising a child. You're both human, Dr. Osei corrected. You made the mistake of thinking marriage was about finding someone who completed you instead of someone you could build a life with. Now you get to decide if you're willing to do the actual building. Outside therapy, Wesley was trying. He cleared his schedule of non-essential travel, showed up at her studio in afternoons, not to supervise, but just to be present. Sometimes he'd bring food, ginger tea and crackers when her nausea was bad, Thai food when she was actually hungry. "You don't have to do this," Doris said one afternoon when he appeared with lunch and a heating pad. "The performative caregiving. I know it's not natural for you. That's the thing." Wesley set up the food on her work table. "It is natural for me. Or it could be. I've just spent 20 years training myself out of it because caring makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is liability in business. But Doris, I want to relearn how to care. I want to be someone who notices when you're uncomfortable and brings a heating pad. What if you can't sustain it? What if this is just novelty, and in 6 months you're back in Singapore while I raise our child alone? Then you'll leave me," Wesley said simply. "And you'll be right to do it. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove I can change. Not with words, but with consistent action over time." The doctor's appointment at 16 weeks became a test of that commitment. Wesley showed up 20 minutes early, visibly nervous, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit. A small thing, but Doris noticed. He held her hand during the ultrasound, watching the screen with wonder as the technician pointed out features. "There's the head, and you can see the spine here. All the major organs developing normally. Would you like to know the gender?" Wesley looked at Doris. "Your choice. Let's know. I'm not good with surprises. It's a girl." The technician smiled. "Congratulations. A daughter." They were having a daughter. "A girl," Wesley repeated, testing the words. "We're having a daughter." In the car afterward, Wesley was quiet. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know how to be a father. I had a terrible father. Absent, critical, impossible to please. I don't want to repeat that pattern, but I don't have a better model." "Then we'll figure it out together," Doris said. "Neither of us knows what we're doing. We'll just have to do our best and hope it's enough." The pregnancy progressed. Doris's body changed. The visible swell of her belly, constant exhaustion, emotions living right at the surface. Wesley was there for most of it, learning to read her moods. He started reading parenting books with intensity he'd once applied to business strategy. Doris would find him at midnight, still awake, taking notes on attachment theory like he was preparing for a board presentation. "You don't have to master fatherhood before she arrives," Doris said gently one night. "You just have to show up and love her. I need to know what I'm doing. I can't just wing this. Wesley, no one knows what they're doing. We're all trying our best and hoping we don't permanently damage our children." He looked up, and she saw genuine fear. "What if I fail? What if I'm as terrible at being a father as I was at being a husband? Then you'll apologize and do better tomorrow. That's all anyone can do. Keep showing up and trying to do better." 6 months into the pregnancy, on a February evening with Boston buried in snow, they had the fight that nearly ended everything. It started over something small. Wesley had scheduled a business trip to London without telling Doris first. She found out from his assistant's calendar reminder on their shared tablet. 3 days in London, Doris said, her voice carefully neutral. "When exactly were you planning to mention that?" Wesley looked up from his laptop, confused. "It's just a quick trip. I'll be back before the weekend. That's not the point. The point is, you scheduled it without talking to me, like I'm just an accessory to your life that doesn't need to be consulted." "Doris, it's a business meeting. I didn't think I needed permission to." "I'm not asking for permission," Doris interrupted, her voice rising. "I'm asking for consideration, for the basic respect of being informed instead of finding out from your assistant's calendar. You're overreacting. I'm 7 months pregnant. Our marriage is held together with therapy appointments and good intentions, and you're sneaking off to London without telling me. How exactly is this overreacting?" "I'm not sneaking. It's work, Doris. Work that pays for this house and your studio and the very expensive private medical care you're receiving." The moment the words left his mouth, Wesley's face showed he knew he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Doris stood, hands shaking. "Get out. Doris, get out of this room. Get out of this house. Go to London early, go to Singapore, go anywhere that isn't here because I can't look at you right now." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Doris's voice was ice. "You meant every word. This is what you actually think, that I'm a financial burden you're graciously supporting, that your money gives you the right to make unilateral decisions. Well, congratulations, Wesley. You finally said out loud what I've suspected for 2 years. She walked out before he could respond, locking herself in the bedroom. She heard him outside the door, heard him try the handle once, then heard his footsteps retreating. 20 minutes later, the front door closed. Then, silence. Doris sat on the bed, hand on her swollen belly where their daughter was moving, and let herself cry. Because this was it. The proof that people didn't really change. That Wesley was still the man who'd married her out of desire but resented the reality. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wesley. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll cancel London." She didn't respond. Another text came through. "I said something unforgivable because I was defensive and scared. You're not a financial burden. You're my wife, and I'm terrified I'm failing you." Then another. "I'm staying at the Langham tonight, giving you space, but I'm not leaving. I meant what I said about staying, about doing the work. I just messed it up spectacularly." Doris stared at the messages, torn between fury and exhaustion. She texted Dr. Osei. "Emergency session tomorrow if possible. Everything's falling apart." The response came within minutes. 1 p.m. "I'll make it work." "Breathe, Doris." The emergency session was tense. Wesley looked like he hadn't slept. Doris had dressed in the armor of anger. Dr. Osei let them sit in silence for 30 seconds, then spoke. "Wesley, what were you actually trying to say when you brought up money?" Wesley rubbed his face, exhausted. "That I feel useless. That Doris has built this incredible life and all I can contribute is money. That I'm terrified I'm still just the wallet, still just the absent provider trying to make up for emotional unavailability with financial support. And when she got angry about the London trip, it felt like proof that nothing I do is enough." "Doris," Dr. Osei said, "what did you hear in that moment?" "That he resents supporting me. That despite all the therapy and promises, he still sees me as a burden. That I was right not to trust this." "So you both heard confirmation of your deepest fears," Dr. Osei observed. "Wesley, you heard that you're not enough. Doris, you heard that you're too much. Neither of you heard what was actually being said." She leaned forward, her voice gentler. "Here's what I'm seeing. You're both still operating from your original wounds. Wesley from feeling like his value is purely financial. Doris from feeling like she's an inconvenient complication. And until you both address those core beliefs, you're going to keep having this same fight in different forms." "How do we fix it?" Wesley asked, desperate. "You already know how. You do the work. You sit with the discomfort. You choose each other even when it's hard. Wesley, you need to believe that your presence has value beyond your bank account. Doris, you need to believe that needing support doesn't make you a burden. And you both need to practice basic communication, like discussing travel plans before booking them. The session didn't magically fix everything, but it gave them language for the patterns. And over the next weeks, they practiced. Wesley started asking before scheduling trips. Doris started voicing her needs instead of expecting him to intuit them. Labor started on a Tuesday afternoon in late April, 3 weeks before her due date. Doris was in her studio when her water broke, dramatic and unmistakable, soaking through her clothes and pooling on the concrete floor. "Oh," she said to the empty room. "That's not good timing." Wesley was in a meeting downtown, but he answered on the first ring. "My water broke. It's early, but it's happening. I'm coming." She could hear him already moving. "Don't drive yourself. I'm calling you a car. Stay there. I'll meet you at the hospital." The car arrived in 6 minutes. Wesley called 3 more times during the drive, checking that she was okay, that contractions weren't too close. "I'm terrified," Doris admitted during the 3rd call. "This is happening 3 weeks early, and I don't have the hospital bag packed and I'm not ready." "You're ready." Wesley's voice was firm. "And I'm 5 minutes behind you. I'll be there before anything happens." He kept his promise, arriving just as they were getting Doris settled. He'd clearly run from the car, his usually perfect hair disheveled, tie askew, expression equal parts panic and determination. "I'm here." He took her hand. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Labor was long and exhausting, and nothing like the serene experience in birth plans. Doris labored for 14 hours, Wesley beside her the entire time, learning what helped, weathering her pain and fear with steady presence. "I can't do this," Doris said at hour 12, exhausted. "It's too much." "I can't." "You can." Wesley's voice carried absolute conviction. "You're the strongest person I know. You built a life from nothing. You survived me at my worst. You can do this. I need you." Doris whispered. I need you to stay, Wesley. Not just now, not just today. I need you to stay. I'm staying. I'm staying for all of it. The hard parts, the boring parts, the beautiful parts. I'm staying, Doris. I promise you. Their daughter was born at 3 a.m, tiny and perfect and screaming with fury. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, with Wesley's eyes and Doris's determination. She's perfect, Wesley said, crying openly. Doris, she's perfect. Doris held their daughter against her chest, exhausted and overwhelmed and filled with more love than she knew what to do with. We need to name her Hope. Because that's what she represents. The hope that people can change, that broken things can be fixed, that we can be better than we were. Hope Clifford Gregg, Wesley said. She's perfect. Here's what I need you to understand. Transformation isn't a destination. It's not something you arrive at and then get to stop working. It's a daily choice, a commitment you make every morning when the work stops being exciting and starts being mundane. If you're still watching, if this story has taken you on a journey from rage to hope, from broken to rebuilding, then subscribe right now. Because this channel, Mr. Kingsley Luck Stories, we don't do fairy tales. We do the truth about what it costs to become better. Share this with someone who's in the middle of their own rebuilding. Let them know they're not alone. Now let me tell you how this story ends. The first weeks with Hope were a study in sleep deprivation and steep learning curves. Wesley, who'd led multinational corporations, was defeated by diaper tabs and swaddle blankets. Doris, who'd believed in her own competence, discovered nursing was nothing like books described. But they figured it out together, taking shifts, learning Hope's different cries, developing rhythms. Wesley worked from home, conducting video meetings while wearing a sleeping baby in a carrier. Doris painted one-handed while Hope nursed. 6 weeks postpartum, they returned to Dr. Osei. How are you both doing? Exhausted, Doris said honestly. Overwhelmed, completely in love with our daughter, and occasionally resenting her for needing us every 2 hours. All normal. Wesley, terrified I'm doing everything wrong, but showing up anyway. Learning that being present for the 3 a.m. feeding matters more than knowing exactly the perfect way to hold her. That's growth. And how's the marriage? Better, Doris said. Not perfect. We had a fight last week about division of labor that got ugly, but we talked through it instead of retreating. That's progress. It is. And what do you both want going forward? I want to keep building what we've started, Wesley said. Keep doing therapy, keep learning to be partners instead of just parents. I want Doris to trust that I'm here for the long term. I want the same, but I'm still scared. Part of me is waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Wesley to decide this is too hard and retreat to work. You don't make that fear go away, Dr. Osei said gently. You live with it while building evidence that contradicts it. Wesley shows up consistently. You notice and acknowledge when he shows up. Over time, the evidence overwhelms the fear, but it takes time. The months that followed were a continuation of that work. Wesley showing up, Doris learning to trust it. He reduced his work hours permanently, hired a COO to handle daily operations, restructured his life around family instead of fitting family into margins. My father would be horrified, Wesley said one evening when Hope was 4 months old. He measured worth in quarterly earnings. He'd think I was throwing away everything he built. What do you think? Doris asked, nursing Hope. I think I'm building something more important than a corporation. I'm building a family, and I'm becoming someone I actually like instead of someone I'm just professionally proud of. Doris reached for his hand. I'm proud of you. For what it's worth, I'm proud of who you're becoming. It's worth everything. By Hope's first birthday, their marriage had transformed into something neither expected but both had earned. They still went to therapy, once a month now instead of twice weekly. They still had fights, but they'd learned how to repair, how to apologize and mean it, how to choose each other when it was hard. The birthday party was small. Close friends and Wesley's younger sister, Hope, smashed cake with enthusiastic destruction while adults watched and laughed. Look at you two, Doris's best friend said. Actually happy. Who would have thought? Not me, Doris admitted. A year ago, I was preparing for single motherhood and the world's most expensive divorce. Now you're a family, an actual family, not just people performing the role. That night, after Hope was asleep, Doris found Wesley on the back patio, looking at stars visible despite Boston's light pollution. What are you thinking about? How close we came to losing this? If you hadn't told me about the pregnancy, If I'd kept running, if either of us had given up during those brutal therapy sessions, we'd have missed all of it. The hard, beautiful work of becoming people who could actually love each other well. I'm glad we stayed, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Wesley pulled her close, and she leaned into him with the easy comfort that came from choosing someone consistently over time. I love you. Not the fantasy version I married out of desire. The real you. Messy, complicated, and difficult, and absolutely essential to everything good in my life. I love you too. The real you, who had to learn how to be present but kept showing up to learn it. Who chose us over the easy comfort of work. Who became the partner and father I needed instead of staying the man you were. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars, listening to their daughter sleeping inside, building a life together. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but earned. Not despite their failures, but because they'd chosen to transform those failures into foundation. And somewhere in her studio, Doris's latest series waited. Paintings of storms and rebuilding, of broken things made beautiful through careful repair. She'd call it kintsugi marriage, after the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with gold, highlighting the fractures instead of hiding them. Because that's what they'd done. Taken the broken pieces of their marriage and mended them with honesty, therapy, and consistent choice. The cracks were still visible, but they'd become part of the beauty. Proof of survival and transformation. Let me tell you what Doris and Wesley learned, because these are lessons that matter beyond their story. First, desire isn't love. It's the spark that starts the fire, but it won't sustain you through the boring Tuesdays and exhausting Thursdays. Love is built through consistent action, through showing up when you'd rather run, through choosing your partner on the days when there's nothing romantic about it. Second, vulnerability is the only path to real connection. As long as you're performing strength, performing independence, performing the polished version of yourself, you're keeping the other person at arm's length. Real intimacy requires letting someone see your wounds and trusting they won't weaponize them. Third, change is possible, but only through daily choice. Wesley didn't transform overnight. He defaulted to old patterns constantly. But each time, he recognized it sooner, corrected course faster, chose differently. That's what growth looks like. Not perfection, but progress. Fourth, the best inheritance you can give your children isn't wealth. It's watching their parents choose each other, work through conflict, model what it means to repair relationship instead of abandoning it when it gets hard. Hope will grow up knowing that love is work, and that work is worth doing. Finally, sometimes the thing you think will destroy you is actually the thing that saves you. That pregnancy, that secret Doris carried in terror, it became the catalyst that forced them both to stop performing and start being real. The crisis became the breakthrough. Doris and Wesley's story isn't over. They'll face new challenges. They'll have more fights. Wesley will sometimes prioritize work when he shouldn't. Doris will sometimes armor up instead of being vulnerable. But they've learned the skills to navigate those moments. They've built a foundation strong enough to weather storms. And on quiet nights when hope is asleep and the house is peaceful, they look at each other and marvel at what they built from wreckage. We did okay, Wesley says. We did better than okay, Doris replies. We did real. And that, messy and imperfect and earned through every difficult moment and every choice to stay, is everything. So here's my question for you. What broken thing in your life are you walking away from that might actually be worth mending? What relationship have you given up on because transformation feels impossible? What would it look like to choose differently, to stay and do the hard work instead of running to something easier? I want you to think about that. And if this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you believe that real change is possible through daily choice, then I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button. Let the algorithm know that stories like this, stories that tell the truth about the hard work of transformation, matter. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear that broken doesn't mean beyond repair, that marriages can be saved, that people can change, that the worst moment isn't the end of the story if you're willing to do the work. Third, subscribe to Mr. Kingsley Luck's stories and turn on notifications, because this is what we do here. We tell stories that entertain, yes, but more importantly, stories that challenge you to become better. Stories that show you what's possible when you choose growth over comfort. Drop a comment and tell me your story. Have you ever rebuilt something you thought was destroyed? Have you ever watched someone actually transform? Have you ever been the one who had to change? This community thrives on truth-telling, on supporting each other through the messy reality of becoming better. Remember, The luxe life isn't about money or status or the appearance of perfection. It's about building something real, something earned, something that can weather storms because it was forged in fire. Doris and Wesley chose each other. Every day, in small and large ways, they choose each other. Their daughter will grow up watching that choice, learning that love isn't a feeling that happens to you. It's a decision you make over and over, especially on the days when it's hard. That's the real happy ending. Not riding off into the sunset, but choosing to do the work. Together. Until next time, keep building your luxe life. The real one, not the performed one. The messy, beautiful, hard-earned one that's actually worth having.